Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's already late and it's the last session of the day. So much appreciated for your kind support of being on the panel here. So today we're mostly going to be talking about, climate change and sustainability in the creative industries. We have a lot to talk about and we have a really, really amazing panel here. And I guess to start with, maybe let's just start with some introductions so that everyone knows here who each of us are. So who wants to start with some introductions? Anyone wants to say a few words?
I'll start. My name is Chris Eppeling. I work in a company in Australia called Virtually Human Studios, where we focus on Web3 entertainment, future of entertainment in Web3, using such things as blockchain and NFTs for gaming. So there's a lot to talk about there.
My name is Imke Fehrmann, and I'm co-CEO of Akkordfilm in Berlin. We are mentor and training as a coach, so lots of things. But I also, in 2013, I co-organized, co-directed the first climate change exhibition in Kathmandu, Nepal, or the first science exhibition. That was shortly after the 2012 IPCC report. And interestingly, I've not been an active, and I almost said I don't want to take part of this panel, but then I felt I have to. I absolutely have to, because I'm really passionate about it. And even though maybe I have less facts than other people around me, so...
Hello, my name is Volker Helsler. I work for Animationsinstitut at Filmakademie Baden-Württemberg, and I run the research and development lab there. I am a technology enthusiast, and a Commodore 64 kit is actually, when I look back for the fascination for technology, it always comes back to this Christmas when I was 10 years old and I got my first Commodore 64 with the datasette. For those who love nostalgia, you knew what that was. But I think it influenced me up until the decision to really make that a profession in one or the other way. And I think one thing that brought me here today is at Film Academy, we've done a lot of research in virtual production for a long time. Just recently, we looked into power consumption, comparing offline and real-time productions, and published a short report of that. And so the whole sustainability topic is really very important. A lot of students demand to get more information and get more good practice and best practice on how to be sustainable within their productions. And I think it's a topic that will probably also spill into the professional world in the next years more intensively than it is today. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elena Pfändler, a production coordinator and green consultant at Zero Animation. It's a company doing 2D and 3D series and feature films. I'm working there since 4.5 years, and since 1 year I'm also green consultant. So I'm really proud that I can be actively part of all the sustainable developments that are happening within our company right now, but also within the projects and our partners and everyone we're working with, and creating guidelines that help make it easier for everyone involved to produce green animation, or at least greener than before.
My name is Hugo. I am a visual effects supervisor and a director. Most people know me from my YouTube channel called Hugo's Desk. And the reason I'm here is because, of course, this is a very important topic for me personally, and of course for everyone, since climate change is a global threat to humanity. And this kind of all started because last year I did a Twitch stream. I do a lot of Twitch streams and a lot of streams on YouTube. And I did a Twitch stream about this topic. And it was great. We had a lot of people calling in and making their cases and having their hot takes as well, of course. And I really, really just want to start this conversation because I sometimes feel that we don't often talk much about some of the problems we have in the industry. That is one of the reasons why this afternoon we did one panel about mental health and well-being, and now we're doing a panel about sustainability. And that's the purpose of this panel. The idea behind this is to have a positive discussion about what we can do to reduce climate change and to be more sustainable on our industry. Since our industry, unfortunately, because it's a technology industry, it does affect climate change quite a lot because of all the render farms and all the technology that it has. But there are ways of us counterbalancing that. And I really hope that we can have a positive discussion about what we could do and what we can do on the future, and really not spend too much time blaming the past or what we should have done, because that's really going to be a waste of time. So that's really why I'm here and why we're all here, really. I guess that's it for my introduction. I guess, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but this industry is mainly a technology industry with a lot of render power, a lot of computers, a lot of servers, not just for the manufacturing of content that we do, you know, but also even just watching that content that we produce is also a huge contribution for climate change, with servers and streaming all over the world and server packs everywhere. I guess maybe let's start with that discussion, because I kind of feel like sometimes we render way too much and we do things kind of not the wrong way, but like we don't really think about it before we do it. So maybe let's start with that discussion. What do you guys and girls think about that?
Well, I think that, like, coming from a producer point of view, and we do co-productions, we work with a lot of people. I mean, now that we work also with Zero, and I'm glad that Elena's green consultant, but I think I have not asked the right questions in the last years. And I first, like, one step back, thank you, Hugo, because this is the first climate change and sustainability panel at FMX, and we have the year 2022. So thank you so much for bringing us here together. And I think that, for example, from a producer point of view, I have not asked that question often enough. I have not been curious enough, like, how do we render? I ask for creative processes. I ask for, like, what do we want to see? Can we review it? But I think we have to change our mindset to really go and say, okay, the next production that we set up and the schedules, what are the questions that we have to ask? And they are about this. And I think I haven't asked them myself enough.
Yeah, in a way, well, first of all, thank you so much, and it's my pleasure. I hope that this becomes something that we do every year, and maybe even more than once a year. I believe that all festivals should have these discussions. But yeah, the render thing, as me, from an artist's point of view, the biggest problem and challenge we have is really the demand of deadlines and the client's expectations. And I feel like that is a big problem, because clients expect everything yesterday, and they expect more and more, and there's these buzzwords like 4K, 8K, IMAX, this and that. And I just feel that a lot of times, do you really need 4K because it's going to be on YouTube? Do you really need 8K? Are you really going to need that extra resolution? Do we need to do 120 versions? Do we need to do 200 versions of something? Could we be more, like, precious and more sustainable on that sense, even from an artistic point of view, of choosing to maybe educate our clients? I don't know if it's easy enough, but there's nothing wrong with us starting to question that and really ask those questions and confront the client. It's going to be on YouTube. Could it just be in HD? Because everyone is going to watch it on their phone and probably going to skip your commercial. Sorry, as much as you love your commercial, it's going to be skipped. So it's like, can we have a frank discussion about this? Because, and maybe even confront them with the numbers of how much climate impact it has to render in 4K versus to render in HD. I think companies need to start doing that. They need to, like, start making the math behind this. How much power consumption difference would it be? I'm assuming it's 4 times more, because 4K is more 4 times. Probably not 4 times, but it's probably 3 or maybe less, you know. But I guess that's the main question I want everyone to start asking, you know. But sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm Portuguese. I always talk too much.
I think that's a really good thing you said, that we try to educate the client, because often a client doesn't know about this. They just know the word 4K and they know everyone using it, so they want to have it. So I think it's a really good point to, as the artist or the freelancer or the company who's producing whatever is needed, that they actually tell them and also tell them the impact on the climate, because I have the impression that many companies, people, whoever is the client in this case, they are interested in being green or sustainable in some way. So it might be that if it's something like, hey, it will be on YouTube, YouTube is not showing the 4K or whatever, that they understand. I think that's a really good point to tell them, to talk to them.
Yeah, you can even make it as a marketing stunt almost,
Yes.
like, and they love those things, like,
Yes.
oh, I'm so green now, of course. But sorry, you were going to say, Volker.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I have an observation I would like to share, and don't get this wrong. It's not an argument to explain why we do the things that we do that are costly in terms of energy. But if you look back in computer graphics, there were these polygon pictures in the 80s, and there was this idea that you could use the computer and computer graphics and algorithms to create a very faithfully and realistic sphere, right, with one light. And then it just evolved over time, and millions of SIGGRAPH papers, and at one point we were at a point where you could just throw so much compute power and known features in renderers to your scene that it will create something that's very realistic. And I think that's where we come from. And we haven't questioned so much if it's energy efficient, because there was just so much fascination in being able to do it. And we're now at a point where we need to step maybe back and ask ourselves, so what is it that we really need for this production? And what is the best choice? Because there is a quite wide variety of choices, including the use of real-time technology, which has a indication that it can, and I'm not saying it is, I'm saying it can be used very efficiently. And I think that's the maybe an attempt to explain where we're from and why it's not a traditional habit to think about power consumption upfront early, but we should maybe start now.
I would love to add to that.
Yeah, because I was,
sorry,
I was actually putting the arc to you.
No, you shouldn't have to. Hello. Yeah. Okay. Is it working? We're saving power already. On that note, like in terms of, it's a human phenomenon in some ways with consumption, right? Just think about the fashion industry and how many T-shirts or sneakers you might have in your closet. Like you only have 2 feet, and some people have 20 shoes, or some people collect 200 shoes. So it's part of that human nature to always want more or have an over excess of stuff. And similarly to the point is, we should educate the client, or we should help educate directors and tell them up front that, hey, yeah, okay, you want this in 8K or 4K, or you want to redo this shot, like it's this little change. I can show it here on my computer versus having to re-render it to show you, on a big screen so you're satisfied. I mean, I've worked with many directors. I forgot to say, my background's as an animator as well and a digital artist, so I've been through the way down from Roto, the early days of my career, all the way up to lead animator. Jumped around a bit. But working with some directors, it's also very subjective, right? Like you'd re-render full scenes. We saw that on Guardians. We worked together back in the day. Full scenes, RH04, right? Yeah, RH04. That was we spent hours of animating. We spent hours of render time, farbs, feathers, all that beautiful stuff, and it gets cut, right? And you see, and so rewrites and stuff like that happens also after the fact, where you've actually put all this computing power, used all these resources, artists, blood, sweat, and tears, plus energy consumption, and then just to be not ever seen again, right? So if we could have had the conversation early on, and you can educate a director or a client, you can help push it, maybe.
I think this is really a topic that could really positively contribute to make this better, because if we tell the clients, if we tell the companies, and if we tell everyone involved, because it's such a, I don't want to say it's fashionable, because that really is terrible, that it shouldn't be fashionable, climate change, but it kind of is. It's a bit of a buzzword now. People like to talk about sustainability. They like to greenwash a bit. They like to talk about those things. But unfortunately, we should take advantage of that, because there's an opportunity here to not do those changes in renders. And I wouldn't even talk just about the shots that get cut. I know exactly what you mean. I've had entire cinematic trailers I've done for games that were canceled. The games were canceled, so none of the work, both the game, the trailer, nothing came out, which is ridiculous. Like games that were developed for 7 years, they never came out. How does that even happen? I don't even want to debate that, but even the quality of, I'm not suggesting people should reduce the quality, but when I look at a production and I look at the amount of time that we are, pardon the French, pixel fucking, you know, literally zooming in 900% to tweak an edge that no one in the world will watch except us. And this is always, it always comes down to when I, for example, show some of the work that I'm doing to people that don't know anything about visual effects, or if I'm showing it to friends or family, or showing it even to my wife. She's not on this, my wife is not part of this industry. When I tell her, like, oh, this is not finished, and she's like, what do you mean? Like, it's finished, it's fine. And I understand that we should not be lowering our standards, but isn't there an equilibrium here that maybe we could make it a bit less perfect, and it will still probably be fine for most people, you know? Isn't that...
Yeah, when's enough enough?
Exactly.
When's enough enough? And, you know, nothing is ever going to be perfect in my mind, I think, and because perfection is subjective. And I think part of that is some directors also change their minds all the time. Right, they're not, and some directors are in a position where they're not sure that what they really want to do, so they still go ahead with production, and that can be pressure, production pressure, and timeline pressure. So they're just going, and then they pivot and change. Right,
that could be solved with the what I'm going to just invent this now, but like a climate budget.
Yeah,
you know,
I was going to. Climate budget would be a great thing. You can only re-render X amount of times because it has this effect.
And if you call it a climate budget, then oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Climate change is a problem. Yeah. It's like they kind of remember, because I think sometimes when we are in the dark rooms of the dailies, we forget about that. Yeah. We're on dailies pointing at pixels and. Again, fucking pixel fucking, and looking at it like, oh my God, let's loop this, let's loop that, and no one watches a film loop.
And how many times have you animated something or put something in a shot, and then it goes into comp and gets motion blurred, and you never see it, or a smoke effect, or something goes in front of it, right? And you've spent a week of maybe 10 artists doing something amazing, and you never see it, right?
But let's quantify that, like how much energy that computer took, how much energy you spent to go to the office every day to go and do this shot. If you were not doing it remotely, maybe you actually went to the office. So if you add up all the impact and climate of just that shot that was lost, maybe we should start putting numbers on it. You know, like, oh, you just went to version 100. Okay, we are X kilos of climate. Like, we should really start doing this. And
yeah, that means you only have 10 left on the next 100 shots.
Yeah. But that will also focus them, because directors need focus anyway. Yeah. You know, I speak from experience. I'm a director. I direct a lot of things, and I need focus. Sometimes I get carried away. Of course, you want to do cool stuff and you get carried away. But I think there's so much to talk about in this topic.
So is this where real time can come in and help us along the way?
It could. I think it could. You know, I really suggest also like people checking out your paper. Mm-hmm. I don't have a link on the screen, but I'm sure you can find it.
You can Google it. It's called green screens, green pixels, and green shooting. And it's actually a comparison of a workshop that we run at Film Academy. It's called a set extension workshop. So the level of proficiency among the students and the time given is very similar for the two productions that we compare. And so we estimated power for one offline production from 2019 and one using an LED wall. And the reason actually really was that we wanted to know, there is no data on this. You can get data on a traditional film production. For instance, the Screen New Deal report is very interesting. It states that an average tentpole production produces about 2,800 tons of CO2, most of it in fuel and power for electricity. but you don't get anything on animation and VFX. So we wanted to know that LED wall, it was so you can get all the specs, 10 by 4 meters. How much power does it produce, and how much frames could we get out of it? And surprisingly, it turns out that we could run the LED production with a third of the offline power production, power consumption. So we self-published it. It's on the Animation Institute's website, or you can send me an email. And
I really recommend everyone reading the paper. It's really fascinating, and like you said, there's no information about this, and we need to start doing those things. If you don't
just
mind,
add one thing, that I mean, I get your point, and you know, my head is more the researcher and the educator. But I think that's what I can offer. You know, we started this discussion among our students, and we don't have official energy budgets, but now we had to update all our render farm. It was getting values in CPU cycles, which isn't really helpful. So we updated that, and now we have an interface to get weekly data on power consumption. So internally, we're looking at these, budgets. And at the moment, we don't have any project peaking out, but you know, we see as soon as one project peaks out that we're going to talk to them and see, like, okay, what is it we can do? How can we optimize? It looks like you're on a path to use a lot of power. So what is it we can do? Something that I have to admit we also did not do in the past. And by just a funny anecdote, by adding this functionality to our render farm, it turned out that some projects used a lot of energy. I really, like, I presented these numbers, and Andreas was almost falling from the chair. He was like, but I mean, it's more current. It's such a pressing issue, you know, that it's a different awareness now through the last years.
But I thought it was really interesting that you just mentioned the development of computer graphics and how we were like the sphere, photorealism. We went first with how cool, this is what we can do, and now we go, oh, now we need to look at climate change, which also I think brings me to one subject I really, really want to learn more about, is the NFT side, because I think it's a similar pattern. We did something that's cool, and then the first voices came as climate change. And like, I have to admit, I was the first one going like, oh no, I'm not going that, totally not climate friendly. But I really want to learn more, and this FMX is good for it. But I have to ask a question to you.
No, it's perfectly fine. And to your point, it's everything in the human innovation space. Just take a car, for example, or trains when they first were invented. It's first later on that we've kind of figured out, oh, wait, climate change friendly. Now we're driving, or hopefully soon, everybody's driving Teslas or something similar to that. But in the NFT and blockchain space, we are that early as well. And of course, we've read all the news and the data, especially on things like Bitcoin, which run on a proof of work network, which is high on computing power, super high. And there are measures being taken in place. For ourselves personally at Virtually Human Studios, we've built a couple of games, and we're building them on the Ethereum blockchain, which also is still a proof of work network. However, you can use layer 2 solutions like Polygon-Matic, which we've moved on to, and you layer that on top, which then takes down the computing power exponentially, 3,000 times or something like that. So we're still that early on in the blockchain NFT space that it's still not good, but it's a matter of time before all these blockchains and all these projects actually move to a proof of stake network, which then on the other side does take it a bit more away from decentralization, but which is the main reason for the blockchain. But at the same time, I think there's a happy medium and a balance, and it's just early innovation. We're on the cusp of it. But it will change, and that's why we're here to talk about, and why I'm happy to kind of get on the panel as well, because people need to be aware. People should lean into it, and we have to do our part to be better. So we're doing that at Virtually Human, and we know other projects are as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of negativity on that side, and I really, one of the reasons I thought that this was a really cool topic to talk on the panel is because we should leave that negativity and try to talk about the future, and really stop arguing so much about how Bitcoin is so bad or BitChain is so bad. That is not the conversation here, because these things are not going to go away. All these technologies are here to stay, as much as people can complain about them or saying that they're not green. Okay, let's then ask the question, okay, they're not green. Okay, what can we do to make them green? That's the answer, not let's take it out. Like, that's not really the question. I guess that negativity usually these days always comes from Twitter, and Twitter is always a very negative place. Just would consider like staying away from it. But I guess that's the conversation from a positive way. How do we do it, and how do we have this conversation and actually put these companies into check to try to change to what you just mentioned?
Yeah, and similar to what we just talked about, having a budget in the film industry, which I think is a brilliant idea. I'd love to kind of help pursue that in some way or another. I'd love to look at the numbers and be able to present it, and even gamify that for a director, just to kind of go, hey, your quota's up and you can't do that anymore. Or you have to actually be creative, like, well, you're not going to get that background modeled now. Now it's a matte painting. Save
like
time, right?
We could call it an organic film, I guess, like an organic product.
Yeah. But there's always creative solutions to these kind of problems, right? And it comes down to choice. And the same, like in the blockchain space, it is that early. I mean, if I dare ask, how many people own an NFT in here? One. Two. Yeah, there's probably more, but they just don't want to say it because it is stigmatized. But how many people own cryptocurrency? Okay, so that's how, again, that's how early we are. I am doing a talk on Thursday. I'm not here to pimp that, but you should come and check it out, because I'll talk more in detail about it as well, and the projects we do and how we do it, and where I think we are going. And to your point, I mean, cryptocurrency is here to stay. It's not a fad anymore. And NFTs are an extension of that, which does have a lot of positives, and which I don't need to explain here. I'll explain that on Thursday, unless you have questions around it.
But I find that one thing that becomes more and more clear the more and more you deal with it. It's a really complex problem, actually, if people are put in front of the choice of like pro and con, they will much more like go into their seat and go either pro and con. But I think what we have to acknowledge is that it's a complex problem. There are gray zones, and I think everyone has to make a choice of learning, and everyone has to make a choice of what the steps are for one person. I mean, we are, I think, 10 years away from being completely irreversible on all planetary boundaries. We are already past some of them. If you want to Google planetary boundaries, there are 9 planetary boundaries, and one is ocean acidification, one is climate change. So it's also a complex view of what we're facing. So, but I think admitting we are in a complex situation, admitting that everyone can do small steps, and starting the learning process and the awareness process, I think that's why I also appreciate that we come together from so different backgrounds here.
I'm really glad you mentioned that about the small things, because that's one of the things that a lot of people switch off when they start thinking about all the big picture thing that can be done. But there's an enormous amount of things that people can do on their small little scale, on their small little pipeline, on their actual work pipeline that could really help on this space. I really would recommend everyone here to start thinking about their power consumption even on their house. Like I recently started really looking into this and measuring it by having actual meters everywhere on the house, and really started like testing what happens if I start switching my computer all the time, and if I start switching certain parts of my office that I don't need. And to a point that I made it so efficient now that I actually have power bricks with buttons and switches to certain parts of my pipeline. So if I'm grading, I switch the computer for grading and the monitor for grading. If I'm not grading, I switch all of that thing. And I'm not saying switch on the button. I'm mentioning switching it completely out of the power socket, with buttons and with power bricks. And ever since I started doing this small thing of just getting power bricks with buttons and starting to switch everything off, I found out that I'm spending half of the power I was consuming. Just because if I'm just going to Google or just go to my email, I don't need my workstation to be on. Maybe I can just use my laptop. It's all these little small things that people can really do on their lives and on their workplace, on their pipeline, that can really help. If we all do it together, if we all switch that power off, it will really add up at the end of the month. I really recommend everyone to try this, to have meters on your sockets and to start seeing the wattage of each of the elements of your office, how much your monitor spends, how much your computer spends, how much your printer spends, how much everything on even the consoles you have, like the gaming console you have, like all those things add up, because 100 watts here, 50 watts there, 75 watts there. Sooner or later, you have 1,000 already, you have 2,000 already without even noticing. And then if you go for lunch, you leave all this on. No, just switch it off. I think I'm so glad that you brought up the small little things.
And from like company view, it's also, of course, we have these big things that we need to rethink and consider a lot, and it's like a big impact, and we should think about it, but it's not done from today to tomorrow. So it's difficult, it's overwhelming. But my experience is that if we have these small things as well as the big things, this is motivating people to start and not just do nothing, like you mentioned. We have this in our company that we created guidelines that are for every employee. So it's not just what the company is doing, what power they are using, and how the pipeline is set up, but we have a guideline for every artist in the office where we have exactly those things, like turning off monitor, think if you really need to print or if you can print it on 2 pages. Think about what products do we buy for the company, like on snacks, milk, coffee. They can be fair trade, yes. So they are not, that's things we all consider, and everyone can start, and it's easy. It doesn't change any existing process. It's just that your habit is a bit different. And if someone tells you, like, if you go for your lunch break, just turn off your monitor. That's it. It's that easy. And it helps people to get started, because what I experience is that people are so motivated to do something. They want to do something better. They want to join, but they are overwhelmed. So if it's just like someone is telling you, like, hey, there's a different search engine that you can use that is planting trees, that's really cool. And I think the key to that is like talking about it, sharing it, because no one is perfect. No one knows everything. So everyone knows a bit. And if we come together and talk about it, that's amazing, because everyone gives you a bit more. And then you think about it, it's like, yeah, that's easy to do. It's not even changing a lot for my life or my money or anything.
No, and you get used to it really quickly as well. I started doing this like about 2 years ago, switching everything off. I didn't even think about it now. I have a process. I go into my office and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and I switch. And then I have a switch 1, 2, 3. I already almost have it memorized in my mind. I know exactly where the switches are. And I now have some of them that can control by my phone and by the Wi-Fi. And so it just becomes it becomes nature of your process of switching on and off, like switching a car on and then switching off the car. I feel like these little small things, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when I did the stream on Twitch and we talked about this, people really were feeling helpless. I felt that when we were doing call-ins and people were calling into the show, and people were like, I don't know what to do. What should I do? Like, I really want to help. I really want to do something, but I don't know what I should do. And there's so many things you can do, from the power consumption, but even other things. Maybe you can consider having one day of the week that you eat less meat, or maybe you consider walking a bit instead of taking a car to work, or maybe consider, there's so many things you can do, small little things that you can really improve, and because all of us together will make a huge difference. And I know sometimes it feels to yourself like, oh, it's not going to make any difference, but it does. It does make a difference at the end of the day. Like, a few years back, for example, I've been a vegetarian for 20 years, and not just because of the animals, but also because of sustainability and trying to become completely vegan as well, which I haven't done yet, small steps. But for the 20 years, I've lived a normal life, and I didn't eat meat. And now I thought, okay, I want to show other people, I don't want to preach anyone. Everyone can eat whatever they want, but maybe there are people that would like to know the types of things that are out there. So me and Anna, my wife, we opened a YouTube channel that only has vegan and vegetarian recipes. And we have a small following, we have small views on the channel, but people really get happy, like, oh man, I didn't know we can do this with tofu. Oh, that's cool. I'm now doing once a week because of your channel, and I'm so happy to hear this, like, okay, cool, this is nice. Like, every one of us can do little small things. We did our small thing, we did a little YouTube channel, but I'm sure all of you here can contribute in some way as well.
And to that point, it's not just, if you reach one, you don't know where that person then reaches on to as well. They might walk off and talk to somebody about what they did, and the changes can have a knock-on effect as well. So it is overwhelming if you sit there and think you're gonna solve this by yourself. You're not, and look at this room, look at this conference, look at this world. We're not alone, right? We're all in this together, and so if everybody adds, it will all add up if we incrementally do our little part. So it's just being conscious about it, having the conversation. We can move that needle. Just this, that's what it's about, moving the needle, not solving it like that.
And I think it's also like you don't have to completely give up something. But I read this crazy stats, and I still think if somebody proves me wrong, I'm happy that. But like I read this crazy stats that in Germany, if every person buys one piece of clothing less, it will be the equivalent of the complete internal German airline traffic. I like that's set in my brain. So if anyone knows that's wrong, but I still think that's it. But it's just how crazy. Like less clothing. I think that, for example, the fashion industry, as much as the food industry, is one of the key pollutants of this earth. And I mean, we're very lucky to work in this industry where you can do and wear what you want. But it's also that we don't go out and show off the latest clothing. And maybe if you have a big studio or so, if you have many people that do a secondhand market for clothing, whatever, like just little things like this. And you don't have to completely give it up, but think the next time, or what is the most sustainable way? And
yeah. It's really interesting what you're saying. This also applies to the technology world as well. For a long time now, I've been trying to tell my students, and I've been trying to tell everyone that I worked for or worked with, do you really need the latest computer? Do you really need the latest graphic card? Do you really need the latest mouse? Or do you really need the latest monitor? Would that monitor maybe last another 3 years? Maybe that graphic card will be fine if you just wait another hour for the render. Would it just be fine to buy used instead of buying new? I buy stuff on eBay all the time. Like I recycle it and sell it back to eBay. As soon as I'm done with a product that is not, imagine that if I'm switching from a HD camera to a 4K camera, I then go and sell the HD camera because someone in the world is going to need it. Is going to want to use it. So I think both the recycling part of it, by selling your used stuff and buying it used as well. Sometimes, of course, you have to buy new, that's fine. But also the right to recycle as well, which is a big thing in Britain. Like, we are crazy debating this and forcing companies to allow you to recycle and to allow to actually fix the stuff. Because I still remember, I'm not that old, but I still remember a time when I could go to a shop to repair a VCR. And I could go to a shop to repair a monitor. I can't do that anymore. Why can't I? Just recently, one of my monitors broke. Like, one of my laptops broke. The screen, when I close it and open, it fails after a while. I went to a shop and said, okay, this is just the sensor. And said, yeah, it's the sensor. Unfortunately, it's merged into the board. We can't do anything. You need to buy a new board. And then the new board is like 800 or 100 pounds. It's more expensive than the computer. And I just feel this is ridiculous. Like, what? I can't just buy a sensor? Why can't I just fix this small little thing? Because the computer is fine. So you know what I do? I don't close the tab there. Like I just shut down the computer. So I don't close the lid. Because if I close the lid, the computer stops. And so I just don't close the lid. And I shut it down. And then I close the lid. And then I open. And then I put it up. Because I thought it was ridiculous for me to not be able to fix this. But this is up to us. We need to put these companies on checks. I'll go another one. I have a lot of products from Blackmagic. Why doesn't Blackmagic have a power button on things? I don't even understand why. I need to switch it off from the socket to switch it off. Why doesn't it have a power button? Why can't I have a button? Obviously, now I went to eBay and I bought a bunch of plugs that you have buttons on them. But this is just silly. Now I'm buying plugs from a Chinese company that sold it to Amazon to put it on the thing that should have a plug in the first place. It's like, I'm sure this is a tweet here, and I can force Blackmagic to do this. I'm kind of like facing the fact that this is all ridiculous, that the way that we are really experiencing technology. And it feels like we used to be better at this. Like, I have here a camera that is 25 years old. It still works. I bet that the camera you have now does not last 25 years.
Well, if that was an Apple iPhone,
yeah,
you know, like the way that they treat their...
What happened? This was fine. It worked fine, and it's older technology. Yeah. I'm sure it's not efficient. Of course it's not. It's 25 years old, but it still works. Yeah. I mean, I know the photos are crap, but that's not the point. The point is, I still have a battery that I can remove from this machine and use and put a new battery. Now these days, the camera is like merged into the motherboard, and it's like, I think we also have a big step to force technology companies to be more aware of these things.
And things aren't made like they used to. Yeah. Like a refrigerator these days doesn't last like a refrigerator back in the old days. It might be more energy, you know, friendly, but you're going to have to buy a new one in 10 years or 15 years, right? And it's the same, again, I mentioned Apple, but why do they change the plug all the time? Like, why does every new phone have a new feature where you can't use something from the past and have to, I mean, it's forced consumerism. It's a business model.
But we can do something about it.
Yeah, we need to talk about it, and we need to raise the voice. We can stop buying Apple products, for example. Like, I've got an Apple, so I'm sorry, but there is ways, and it's just, you know, like we said before, nobody's perfect, and it's not about being perfect, because again, nothing is. It's subjective, but it's about just moving the needle, and maybe somebody else decides not to go Apple, but then somebody else decides to keep an old fridge or repair something, and just having the conversation, being aware, leaning into it, and being open about it.
There's an idea. That's what we're going to suggest to FMX. That like everyone who's here, that we just look at the technology, and that we ask people. So maybe I've asked the FMX managers like this.
Speaking of questions, did we want to open up to the room at some point?
We do. Yeah, I think we should. We should really open up the questions, and so I guess, like, is there anyone that wants to chat? Yeah, go for it. We have an extra mic, or? Excellent, perfect. Look at that.
Or you can just shout at us.
I like questions. So, where does the responsibility of learning yourself how to repair your own equipment? So, you can fix your sensor, or you can take out the battery of your iPhone, and you're not going to destroy it. Yeah, the warranty's gone. Screw it. But
I do that all the time, and sometimes with a lot of damage. Sometimes it doesn't get back together. But I've been doing this since I'm a kid. I open everything, and then, oh, where's these 3 screws? Where do they go? I don't know. Like, but I think not all of us will be able to repair certain things because they're too complex. But there are YouTube videos that kind of teach some stuff, and there are stuff that you could do. I kid you not. I'm now thinking about all the equipment I have in my house, and if it breaks down, what could I do about it? Even the other day, I had an old camera that broke down, and I called a company, a really, really small local company in London that was still repairing cameras. Like, an old guy was still like there. He was so happy that I called him. He was like, oh yeah, I can repair that camera. It's a video. Yeah, I used to do those things 20 years ago. Send it back to him, and he repairs the camera for me. And he's like, unfortunately, that craft is lost now, but hopefully maybe we could bring that back. I hope we could. You know?
Sorry, is it lost, or have we been conditioned to just be told that this is not, we can't do that? I think, you know, we're able to do a lot of amazing things. Like, we are all the same at the end of the day. So if somebody can do something in an amazing room, you can do the same thing if you really want to. But have we been conditioned through, again, marketing and just the way that the world is right now? So, and can we change that? Like anybody could open a phone and have a go. And like to your point, there's YouTube videos that tell you everything. Like you could bake any cake in the world as well. Fix any boot, you can sew any clothes. It's all there. But are we being told that we can't do it? Are we being told that it's going to waste our time? Like there's all these factors that play in, which is basically the human mind. Yeah, but responsibility as well.
There are actually repair workshops in most bigger cities, so this is something you need to look out for. They either do it for you or they teach you to do it. So that's pretty cool that you can go there with your broken thing and then they look at it and perhaps show you how to repair it. So I mean, it always probably depends on what it is, but there are companies that do it where you don't need to send it somewhere and then you buy refurbished, which is probably also good, but there are small companies that actually teach you.
And for this, as much as for the other things, I think it's our responsibility is also to be multiplicators. Yes, that's the word. So to talk about it, to share the knowledge, to share this, to share information, because 5 people won't do anything, but we're now 150 or something.
Go. You had a question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You were covered.
I just wanted to bring it back to the first conversation. You were talking about budgets and having a green budget, but we have budgets on films. Anyone who's had to bid for a film, for a game, for a series, we come up against having to reduce the budget to make it work for the client. So why is the budget of the film not enough to drive down and make us more efficient? Same with the render farm. We're sitting there. If we have to get a new render farm, we're already sitting there trying to reduce how much we're rendering, reduce how much power we're consuming for the company to not lose money. So where is that difference? Where does it lie?
I personally feel that that's why we're doing this panel, because all these companies need to start debating this with their clients. I truly think that it's just clients. It's not, I don't want to blame anyone. I feel like they don't even think about it.
Well,
they don't think about the changes. They don't think about the versions. They don't think about like how much work or power consumption could go to a project, I think. But maybe if we tell them, and if we have hard numbers, maybe they'll think about, like, oh, wow, okay, we probably should do something different. I think that's it.
Yeah, I also think that the budget for a film is not the same as the climate budget. I think it may actually be counterproductive, because if you have a really low budget, what you're going to do is like, how can I satisfy the client? How can I make the image as good as possible for as little money as possible? And I think that at this stage, where we're still in the change, where we're still in transformation, the climate-friendly version may not be your cheapest version. So I think that the budget itself is not necessarily the answer to the climate change. I think it needs some kind of measurement that is different, because green energy is more expensive than coal energy. I mean, the big data centers, I read something about the big data centers of Google, of Amazon. They're partially using like up to 50-60% coal, because this is cheap energy. So I think budget and budget in that case are two different things.
Yeah, I just would like to share maybe an idea. I think, the moment the young talent and the professionals go out and for their next job interview start requesting, so how does your company actually deal with sustainable producing, and maybe at one point when we get directors behind this idea, maybe they put those numbers in CO2 footprint at the end of the credits, and it becomes something like, look, that's what I did, and that's how much energy I used, like a competition. And I'm sure it's an interesting attribute for a future employer to say, like, look, that's what we're doing, and we take it seriously. And if you want to work in my company, then you can be sure that we do everything to be sustainable. So I think we're at the beginning of a potential for really rethinking everything within how we create imagery, and that be maybe the start.
It's like a green production with a logo at the end. That's an awesome idea, and I don't even know why that was not done yet. I feel like that's that's a really powerful idea as well. But the audiences will really respect that as well. And yeah, I guess, anyone that's watching this either on the live stream or on YouTube later, just steal that idea. That should be done right away. Go for it. You want to answer, or you?
No, I just wanted to say that in Germany this is starting now. So it's probably not the best yet, but in the region we are, the funding companies, they started to have a green label that you get if you have specific things done, like organic label or something. And of course it's not the best, and there are criteria that cannot be done or doesn't count for everything, or greenwashing as a topic, but it is starting. So at least there is something.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think there was one over there. No, I think he was first. Sorry, I think he was first. He was already. You'll go next.
I'm trying to see an underlying logic in the whole problem. And it seems to me that everything we are doing, this industry specifically, is driven by this human attribute for freedom. Directors want options, producers want time. We are trying to do everything we can so that they get that. We are not trying to tell them you have two options for the sake of the climate. We're trying to do the exact opposite. All the technology we invent, all the research, it always goes in the direction of efficiency for the sake of freedom, I think. Creative freedom in many cases. I'm not saying that for this reason we cannot change anything. I'm just trying to figure out, are we maybe looking at the problem at a too high level? Maybe we should take a few steps back and try to figure out what is it actually that we want as people. Why are we not able to make those choices without huge pressure in our breathing, basically, behind our necks? I mean, climate change is nothing new. There have been electric cars many years ago already. So most of the things we are facing right now are not new problems. It's just now they have become so evident and so painful in many cases that now suddenly we pretend to care. So I'm wondering, why didn't we care earlier? Why didn't people care earlier? It must have something to do with the things all of you said. It has to do with choice, maybe it has to do with training and conditioning, like why don't you fix things? You could. Are you told that you can't? Whatever. I mean, most of this, to me, doesn't seem to have anything to do with budgets and money. It's more like we aren't that honest with ourselves about what are we actually willing to give up, because there will be things that we can no longer do if we want to change something. Mm-hmm. There will be things that we can't do anymore, and that's very inconvenient. And saying things like blockchain or whatever it is are here to stay, maybe, yes, but you could say the same things about petrol engines, and obviously they are not here to stay. So if we want something changed, then maybe it's here to stay, so let's figure out how to reduce its impact. It's the wrong way to go about it, because we really don't have time to look at everything and try to reduce its impact. Some things just have to be gone. So what do you think about that?
We don't have all the answers, I can tell you that. Like,
neither do I.
It's a really good point. It's really good points that you're making.
I can't pretend to have any answers. I'm just wondering, because all the discussions that I've heard so far never go that far back to figure out, okay, what are the actual hard choices? Everything is always trying to find some compromise between.
That has to come later.
Going.
You see, that's the thing, because the problem. This is the same factor I face on a very small scale with being vegetarian, eating vegan because of these choices. As soon as I if I would have started telling people that they should be vegan, they switch off and they go away. So I don't, because there's no point. I think in some way we can't really be that abrupt, or that, I know that we are in an emergency, but if you start being too abrupt and you start being too put this real on everyone's faces, unfortunately people switch off. They do. They just don't want to talk about it, because they feel like, oh, this is impossible. So I'm going to just take advantage now and then I'll die and that's fine. A lot of people have that mindset. So unfortunately, there's no other way, for me personally at least, that's my opinion. In my opinion, there's no way for us to do it any faster or any more bluntly, because people switch off. People just don't want to have the tough conversations. Maybe there will be a time that they will, if we literally have like really bad weather affecting the actual life day-to-day basis of their life. Because that's the thing, until it doesn't affect their day-to-day life, it doesn't matter. And you know, but that's why we're having this conversation, because we have to start somewhere. There's no other way. Like, think about this. We never even had the panel like this before. So, you know, already having the panel is already a first step. It's 2022, and we should have had this panel maybe on the 90s already, and we didn't. So it needs to start somewhere. But I feel like it's difficult to make it so negative and so pressured, you know.
No, and actually there's no reason to make it negative, and I think that's actually technology can be used towards the good in this. But I want to get back to the things you said, because there were a lot of things. But maybe let's think about one comparison. You know, we're in Stuttgart here, home of Porsche and Mercedes-Benz, right? So, I mean, they've been building combustion cars for centuries, and it took an Elon Musk to tell them, like, look, you maybe should reconsider what you're doing in building your cars, because I'm going electrified, and I'm going to tell the world that's how we're going to build cars. And now, of course, they're also building these electrified cars, but it just shows that an established way of creating something, in that case a car, isn't changed overnight and without any certain pressure or competition. And I think that's the situation we're facing in media production, film or visual effects, especially when everything is channeling up to a director who has the ultimate power in most cases on yes or no or redo, and maybe very little understanding of what that decision might mean in terms of money being burned. Famous directors might not care, you know, they say, like, I don't care, I just want it green and he did it black, so, you know, just redo it. But this discussion about, look, that's the energy, and that's the budget you started off with, that's where you are. I think that's one way to get started. And just as Hugo said, you know, we're here to make a start. We're also here to actually discuss first things that we found out. And I wanted to pick up on something that's been said very early on, about, you know, this looking pixel fucking, right? But there's never been a perception study on this, you know. So are you rendering with an offline renderer, or couldn't GPU renderer with deficits in some places deliver you something that the audience wouldn't even realize? So I'm faithful that we can continue with such data later this year to figure out among test studies, you know, if consumers or recipients of such content in visual effects would really see and feel a difference about the content, or if this is just us being used to push everything towards its final visual finesse, because that would mean we would fundamentally need to reconsider what we do in terms of, we're creating something very special, but there is a point where, you know, you should let go of certain things, because they're not so important in the overall production, and that's something I couldn't tell you what it is. We need to figure it out, and then, you know, quantify it and say, like, that's something, you know, our tests shown that you could reduce it, and it's very likely that, you know, it will not influence the overall imagery and quality of what you're doing, but we don't know yet.
And I think there's also psychology to it. I mean, everyone has to find their own motivation, why they want to change. And for example, there's a concept of motivational interviewing, which you use, for example, like for vaccines or something. Somebody that doesn't want to get vaccinated, if you tell them your child has to get vaccinated, they don't. They will not just go like, oh yeah, okay. But there's a technique, and there's questions. There's like being curious, trying to understand the person, trying to help the person to find their own motivation. And I feel sometimes with climate change, it's something similar. We have to encourage people, empower people to find their own motivation. We don't have any time. We're running out of time. Today, someone said, like, the Western industrial countries have like 8 months. We don't have 10 years. We really have 8 months to flip a switch. But I think what we need to do is we need to try and motivate people in their own way of doing steps. And I don't have the answers to your questions. I really like them. And they will keep probably coming back. So I think it's about motivation and trying to make people do the first step on their own because that's what they want to.
You had a question?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Stefan. So from the start, you were speaking about content and also YouTube and 4K, 8K. Basically, I cannot change that I have to do 4K or 8K because when I upload, let's say, a video on 4K or 8K, it ranks it better. So it's forcing me to go that much. So from that point of view, I cannot change. So basically the main companies are putting that to me. So I have to output so much content, even the NFTs. So many people and artists were killed in this process because I love NFTs and I'm just now going away from it because it's overhyped. Now in this creative industry, I don't know if the directors or the companies are putting hype. So we are creating more and more and more content. So from that stand of view, definitely we are going to have a better render farms and they will be efficient and the problem will be solved. But the biggest problem is we have to produce more content. How we can reduce that because most of the content nobody is seeing. Or the NFTs that are being produced, it's like stupid and they're killing the good artists. So how we can prevent that and also we can solve the health issue of the creative artists.
Wow, that's we don't know exactly how to solve that. And I guess I'll just be really brief and then I'll pass it over to you. But I feel like the content thing with the 4K, again, for me, like, I think it is possible for you to upload in HD and still be fine. I don't believe that you notice the difference on YouTube with the compression that it has. Would it really make a huge difference? I also think that we can't have a rule for everything. Maybe certain things can be 8K and 4K. Some things can be in HD. We can't just like prevent or police what gets done. Unfortunately, it's the same thing that happened a few years ago on the App Store, on the iPhone. You know, there was some good games, and now there's like, I don't know, 1 million bad games there. I mean, and games that probably have 10 downloads, if much, you know. So yeah, there's that question. Do you really want to produce something that will be downloaded 100 times on the Sony PlayStation Store, or do you want to produce something that will be downloaded and forgotten 1 month later? Those are valid questions that need to be asked. But I don't see people asking those things. They just put them on the system. So
same with the Netflix. You got Netflix, you got Binge, you got Stan, and look at all the content now there's opportunity there, and people just pumping out content to get on, and you know they'll take on almost any documentary these days, or any movie, or any animation, right? But to answer your question, like NFTs right now, it is saturated. It's like the early days of the internet, right? When the internet bubble and the .com. And I think there's a lot we can learn. While we can't change the past, you can learn from it, right? And looking at what we went through with the internet stage as well, there's a bubble, and we're heading on a trajectory now with NFTs where a bubble's going to pop. And I think 99% of these projects are going to, you know, not be anything. But they still consumed a lot of energy to get there, right? And that's, I don't know. Again, it's education. It's talking about it. It's can we have regulation? Sorry, I'm blocking out the lights. I'm jet lagged and tired. And let's not talk about I flew around the world to get here, right? Yeah. Anyway, consumption there. I should have just jumped on a video screen and sewn my face. Then I wouldn't have to wear these pants. Wait, I'm wearing shorts. No. But yeah, it's a conversation starter, and I think we need to just be aware of it and talk about it. Blockchain is going to change, and it's going to be more eco-friendly. That we're already seeing that now with there's green or eco-friendly blockchains coming out there. Toucan protocol, Polygon-matic, as I mentioned as well. So again, it's we have to innovate to kind of fix it. We've jumped in. Just like, you know, cigarettes were cool in the 80s and it was in every movie, right? Like, let's not forget what drives this. It's money, right? At the end of the day, it's money. And then to your point, Mark, about the budgets as well, that's a money budget. That's not a green budget. They're two separate things, right? The directors, the companies don't really care about the green. We're starting to care, but they're caring about saving money and profit, right? And so that's what those budgets are around. They're not around, and we need the separate budget which says this is what you're doing to the world. This is what you're doing to the world. It can easily, that this is what we need to do. There needs to be a column next to it where it actually says this is what it means. And you might even have to visualize it, not by numbers, by actually saying you're going to kill this many animals today or this many trees, just to make it really impactful and kind of put it in the face of a director who really, again, directors are under a lot of pressure too. So you got to understand it's subjective. It comes back to that creative. He's in a dark room and he has to deliver, and his career is on the line. He's in his bubble, right? We're all floating around in our little bubbles in this amazing place called Earth, and we have our problems. He's trying to solve his problems too. So the last thing on his mind is how many trees are dying because of his movie and his choices too. But talking about it, leaning into it, having these conversations are super important, and that's where it can start. Is it too late? I believe it's not too late, but listening to the science and data and understanding that we live on a planet where gravity actually exists, right, and it's not flat, is important. And so it's like, I don't mean to make a joke out of it, but yeah, I think this is really important. Everybody can do their little piece. Nobody's going to change overnight, right? We're not asking everybody to be vegan. We're not asking everybody to jump on their bicycle tomorrow and ride their bike to work. But if you ride your bike and you stop eating something else and you do something and you switch off your computer, all that adds up, right? And if you talk about it now openly or are willing to have the conversation, that can push the needle further with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say that this panel, these people, these questions, for example, inspired me to be better. And that's definitely something keeping in mind. Like, it really helped me to rethink and to go like, oh, okay, I have to do more.
It helped me as well. Yeah, I think that's really the best part of this. Unfortunately, I think we need to kind of wrap up because we're already like going over time. It's already, yeah. Oh yeah, you're saying it's okay? Yeah, we need to wrap up. Yeah, we've been already over an hour, so I don't know if could we do one last question maybe or just wrap up now? Wrap up? Yeah, we'll wrap up. Okay. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being on the first Sustainability and Climate Change panel of FMX. Hopefully, we'll have one in 2023. I hope so, if we're still all here. But thank you so much for being here, and yeah, we'll have a nice FMX, I guess. That's it.